Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, my finest friends. Welcome to the 26th episode of the ninth season of the Tom Petty Project podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Brown. This is the weekly podcast that digs into the entire Tom Petty catalog, song by song, album by album, and includes conversations with musicians, fans, and people connected with Tom along the way. Today's a guest episode, and my guest is the talented, generous, and wonderfully fun Pete Nestor. I met Pete online really early on in my sort of plans to develop this podcast, and he was very generous and more than happy to share the things that he'd learned from starting up his own show with me. Over the last couple of years or so, we've been listening to each other's thoughts on music on our various shows, and we've struck up what I think is a pretty genuine friendship online that goes a little bit beyond our shared musical tastes. I've no doubt that whenever I do manage to get down to New Orleans someday, we'll be able to spend some time in each other's company very comfortably, very enjoyably. I've been looking forward to getting Pete on the show for a while now, and this was definitely one of the most sort of relaxed and easy conversations that I've had with anyone who I didn't actually know or I haven't sort of met in person. You know, we talked lots about music, performance, Tom, of course, and Tom's music. And we actually got into a little bit of some of the byproducts of hosting music review podcasts that you might find interesting. Don't forget to check out the fantastic show that Pete co-hosts with his great pal Brian Ruskin. It's called Honest and Unmerciful, a record review podcast. And right now you can find it on Spotify, but soon it will be coming across all platforms. Sit back, relax, and please enjoy my conversation with the wonderful Pete Nestor.
Tom Petty. Tom Petty Project. Tom Petty. Hey, Tom Petty Project.
So yeah, how do we do this? I mean, I think I know how we do this, but how do we do this? Give me.
I'm just gonna start asking you questions, Pete. Super easy. Questions like, where were you? So you're not living where you were born and raised. You've traveled around quite a lot in your life. So where were you born? You were born, I think, somewhere around New York, right? New York State.
New York State, and that's right. That's kind of an important qualifier. Upstate New York is what we always say, because if you say you're from New York, people are like, "Oh, you must have been born on the D train in a subway tunnel under the Statue of Liberty or something." But no, I was born in upstate New York, a town called Johnson City near Binghamton, near Syracuse, halfway between Niagara Falls and New York City. Hopefully that puts into context the
Yeah.
location. But yeah, kind of I think you and I are of a similar age.
Yeah.
So on the wrong side of 50 or the right side of 50, depending on how you want to call that, as of a year or two ago. And kind of growing up there, what was that like? It was a lot of cable television. There wasn't the technology didn't exist in the same way that it does today, but of course, cable television was like the technology. And for me, like soaking in MTV, soaking in the Weather Channel, which actually led me to kind of where I ended up career wise. So kind of a dichotomy of things there, and then ESPN, watching a lot of sports, playing a lot of sports, and just kind of being a generally active kid on a bicycle and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
but MTV for me, I was 8 when that hit, and I remember that just from the very beginning. And that was just I've kind of learned as I've gotten older that I'm a very visual guy, and I think that I didn't really realize this until, again, sort of thinking about how to put this intro together and sort of discuss my background a little bit. Geology, as which is what I sort of fell into as a career, is very visual. There's a lot of looking at, observing, making maps, making things in 3 dimensions, understanding things in 3 dimensions. And there's something to that with music, number one, but also with the visual media of MTV. I think that without realizing it, I think maybe it was kind of built into my DNA a little bit. Was MTV a thing in 1981 in England?
I can't remember when we got it. We definitely, I mean, everyone, because I mean, they play the guitar on the MTV, so Dire Straits kind of brought that into our living
Sure.
rooms. I don't think we got it right from the off. I would say we got it right around that sort of 83-ish. I don't fully remember, but that's what my memory of it is. So we
Mm-hmm.
weren't really as sort of I wouldn't say I grew up with it
Hmm.
until a little bit later. But you know, if you think about the impact on popular culture that MTV had, like you said, if it came out in 81, that's 8 years old. 8 to sort of 13 years, really primed for a lot of
Oh yeah.
foundational sort of music being brought into your life. And that stuff that you listen to then, you still listen to now, right? And so you
Yeah.
kind of watch it with your friends and things. So I'm curious, you know, because MTV really was music television back then,
Hmm.
do you remember sort of being exposed to just new artists, or was it sort of
Oh,
reinforcing the stuff that you were already listening to? Like, what was the balance of that?
you know, we had there was a pretty big college in Binghamton, State University of New York at Binghamton. Um, but I wouldn't say that that sort of bled over into sort of the general populace of the town. It was
Right.
very much a town kind of in its own little space. And so, you know, whatever was on the radio, which was top 40 radio in 1981, and then MTV, which was like, you know, Pat Benatar, the Police, Elvis Costello, the Pretenders. It's a band called the Greg Kihn Band,
Okay.
which sang the song Our Love's in Jeopardy, Baby." If you remember that song, it was a hit at the time, and I know it was a hit because Weird Al Yankovic did a parody of it. So
Right.
that's what qualifies for a hit in 1983 or whatever. But yeah, I never would have heard the Greg Kihn Band or maybe even Elvis Costello. You know, at that point, a lot of his,
Yeah.
well, he never was a big radio hit guy in 78, 79, 80, with maybe save for one or two songs. So yeah, you know, that's where I was exposed to all this stuff. And then of course, you know, we'll get into it later for sure, as
Yeah.
this is the subject of the podcast, but all sorts of Tom Petty stuff that I really remember. And it's, you know, I see those videos today and it brings me right back to being 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
It just sort of sealed the deal for me. So yeah.
Especially,
So
because like you say, if you're a visual person too, I mean, and we will talk more about this once we get into it, but like Petty's knack for understanding the visual medium. And I don't think he was doing it to exploit that market necessarily. It's just sort of, well, that's what I kind of feel like doing. This will be fun. You know, the label's going to give us resources to do it. So why not all dress up in cowboy gear and go out into the desert? Or why not dress up as the Mad Hatter? Like, what? Yeah, it's just a bit of fun. Let's do it. So if you're a very visual person, of course, that's going to give you these super visceral memories. They're going
yeah.
to just transport you right back as soon as you see it, right? Of course it is.
And it was, you know, even before then, you know, a lot of the videos on MTV were just performance videos because no one had the sort of the think outside the box attitude of turning it into a story or whatever until,
Yeah.
you know, like you say, You Got Lucky or you know, the Michael Jackson stuff at the same time in '83. But even like The Waiting is a great example of just doing just enough to differentiate yourself. And then Woman in Love, It's Not Me, for me, like, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but that song and that video and the imagery of that black and white and the way it's kind of got that dynamics of getting loud and soft and all of that stuff just worked so perfectly. It just was such a great visual combination, even though it was just a performance video. And then the
Yeah.
Stevie Nicks, you know, Stop Dragging My Heart Around, the slow motion of her sort of twirling and yeah, without them even realizing it, maybe I feel like the band and whoever was doing their direction of the music videos at the time really hit on something really crucial and important. So
For sure, yeah. So, I mean, that's music that's coming in from the outside. But what was music like in your house? That what did you sort of grow up with? What did your parents listen to? Were they musicians? Like, what was the music situation in the Nestor house?
that's a good question. You know, I grew up actually in a slightly unconventional household where I had an uncle. I lived with my grandmother and my mother, and my father came on the scene a little bit later to sort of fill out the house, and that's a whole separate topic.
Okay.
But really we really one of my first memories is of one of my uncles having a Neil Young poster that kind of haunted me, which had nothing to do with music, but it was just an image of Neil Young, kind of long beard and you know, maybe he had a harmonica or something, and just sort of huddled over. It kind of
Yeah.
scared me, to be honest. that image, but the music that I remember my other uncle, who was about I would say 12 years older than me. He was listening to Led Zeppelin, so I remember Zepp 4
Yeah.
playing on the turntable in 1976. And that was really what my first introduction. And he's always been a music fan, and I actually took a lot from him and his musical taste. But really, Zeppelin for that's just the one that just always sticks with me as being
Yeah.
my visceral memory from being 3, 4 years old. And then all the other stuff, I remember there was a the Monkees TV show playing on reruns back in 1976. I was like, oh, these Beatles, they're really funny. And I remember, sort of getting into that stuff. And then, Captain and Tennille, Tony Orlando and Dawn, those are stuff that I remember. But then I guess Billy Joel's Glass Houses, I remember borrowing that from a friend when I was 7 years old. And that was like the first time I physically held the medium of an album in my hand and placed it on the record player. M's Pop Music was a song that I remember also, like the first single that I placed probably on a turntable. So kind of a random, I don't know if you say a random hodgepodge, but I didn't have, there wasn't a very strong, put it this way, there was no musicians in my family. There was no direct like, oh yes, he played guitar and he handed me a violin when I was 4 years old and
Yeah.
suddenly I was playing the blues or whatever. So yeah,
That's interesting because I always assumed that most musicians came from sort of fairly musical backgrounds, someone's because you think that, well, how are you going to get introduced to playing if you don't have that kind of, that kind of environment around you? But I've spoken to lots of musicians who say, no, no one played in my family. I just decided I wanted to play guitar. And I think that's that thing with music that if it's in there, it's gonna come out in some
yeah.
fashion. You're gonna get it out somehow. And it doesn't matter whether you pick it up at 8 or you pick it up at 48, it's coming out at some point, right?
Yeah, and I think that the difference in some ways, and in my story, and I don't know if this holds true for other people, is that it took me longer to get there, I think. And I do wish that I had really taken advantage of some things in high school or middle school sooner than I did. I was a drummer in middle school. I played drums in the concert band. Never got into the set, and I actually in about 10th grade or so, um, I had a decision to either buy a drum kit or an acoustic guitar. And that decision was a pretty easy one to make, given the fact that a drum kit cost about $1,000 and an acoustic guitar cost about 110 or whatever. And it was pretty easy to set up an acoustic guitar in your bedroom versus a drum kit.
And also, you can sit around the campfire and impress the girls with an acoustic guitar, right?
Yeah. There you go. Exactly. That's right. So, yeah. So, but I do wish, the piano is something I've never picked up, and I wished that I had learned piano. I wish that I had taken, maybe mowed a few extra lawns for a few extra guitar lessons. I only had 2 guitar lessons in my life, which is why
Yeah.
I'm still a very middle of the road guitar player. A lot of it I just picked up. I had the Beatles songbook, the complete Beatles songbook when I was in high school. Learned chord shapes from that. Friend of mine was a big Stones fan. He taught me kind of the Keith Richards trick on playing the blues, which is just to bar the A chord and then just to drop your pinky down in random places, and suddenly you're playing half of their songs from 1968 to 1972.
Yeah.
Which is very, very true. It sounds like a joke, but it's not. Like Beggar's Banquet's already in your arsenal once you figure out that trick. Um, so that was kind of how I got going. But like I say, I really wish that I'd spent a little bit more time. And then I did kind of, as I was leaving high school, I had friends that were going to the local university. A friend of mine, Mike Langley, known as Generic Mike amongst the SUNY, sort of the underground name that he used. But he was a DJ over there at State University of New York at Binghamton, and he introduced me to a lot of the more interesting kind of underground bands, like, I don't know, Sonic Youth and King Missile and the Violent Femmes and Nine Inch Nails. I remember hearing the Nine Inch Nails stuff before like that became a thing with their Pretty Hate Machine album, Ministry, stuff like that. And then
Right.
and that bounced me over to working my own stint on college radio at Cornell University, WVBR there, which is still in operation. And that, I mean, now we're talking like 92, 93, and what an amazing time for music.
Yeah, man.
Learning guitar and sort of starting to get to the point where I was figuring out how to play it and how to actually make it sound like I wanted it to. And then being on college radio, just as Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and all that stuff hit was just an incredible opportunity. So yeah, I
Think
mean,
about you think about that though. Sorry, but that's 30 years ago now, or just over 30 years ago now. Rock and roll or rock music hasn't had anything like that since, right? I mean, because it's rock sort of more or less died in terms of commercial terms around 96, 97 ish. But you think that there's got to be some thing that come in, and it's not Imagine Dragons, and it's not sort of this new hyper polished pop kind of rock that we do now, but we need something to bring us back because grunge, which I still don't love as a label, it did take rock and roll back into that thrashy garage, make a noise. I mean, try and play your instruments well, but it's more sort of about the feel and about the passion behind it, rather than all the hair metal boys who were sort of in it for the cars and guitar, cars and girls, right? So
yeah.
I just think I feel like we're ready for a sea change again within rock and roll. That maybe we go back to blues, or maybe I thought Bonamassa might be it for a while, but like
Yeah.
when going at that time, was there a sense that it was important, or was it just everyone was just excited about the music, or did you kind of know that something was happening?
Oh, I mean, I think that we all kind of recognized something was happening. I think you would probably agree with that. It just felt like a lot of people talk about the Beatles. I'm not saying, I'm not going to compare
Yeah,
that genre of music and that time to when the Beatles showed up, but people always talk about one of my favorite quotes from music is Phil Collins talking about Sergeant Pepper when Sergeant Pepper was released. Everybody was playing music over in this room, and then Sergeant Pepper gets released, and everyone's like, "Oh, wait, what's in that room? Like, I didn't even know there was a room over there." And certainly grunge in that time period wasn't the same, and there
yeah,
was a lot of things that were kind of bubbling in the late 80s that you sort of look back and you listen to the Replacements and you see Sonic Youth and you see some of these other bands, but you kind of, even in the moment, it was just like, man, I couldn't wait for the next, the Pearl Jam second album when that came out, Versus came out. I remember um heading in my buddy's what did he have, a T-Bird or Fiero or some crappy little sports car from that was already 10 years old and out of date at the time. But I remember just putting Verses in the cassette player and just riding around Binghamton and just going, yeah, just
yeah,
just being so overwhelmed with the exciting things that were coming out of that crappy little tinny treble heavy speaker that we were listening to. And just, yeah, there was definitely a sense of something new and exciting happening for sure. And I don't know, you probably felt that same way, I guess, too.
I don't know because I think it was slightly different in the UK. I don't think it landed in quite the same way
Mm,
because we didn't really fully embrace the hair metal thing. Bon
right,
Jovi and Poison, they had the radio hits, but they weren't as Bon Jovi probably were because they were worldwide and global, right? But all
right.
the rest of the bands like, Motley Crue and Cinderella and Poison, although Cinderella I still quite like. But anyways, there wasn't that culture of that. So I don't think there was quite as much to push back against. And
Yeah,
especially in my friend group, we all did listen to Sabbath and Rainbow and Deep Purple and Zepp. And so grunge isn't a huge step removed from that. So for me, I didn't really feel that quite the same way, which is why I find it
interesting.
interesting speaking to an American about it. Because, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and two things. One, Cinderella, the drummer Fred Corey, actually from my hometown of Johnson City, New York, population 17,000. So it was cool that you
Cool.
just mentioned Cinderella. And then number two, yeah, I guess that's a really interesting point because I know when I got to college in 1990, I remember what was kind of big and coming up was the Manchester sound, right? You had the Stone
Yeah.
Roses and Jesus Jones and that's that sort of trend that didn't quite break through in the same way for sure, other than on college campuses
Yeah.
in the U.S. So maybe the U.S. and the U.K. were sort of following different paths, and it was just ready to again blow the barn doors open a little bit more with grunge and a new sound. And you all already kind of had a new sound that you were gravitating towards and could take forward in a different way. So that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. My brother was listening to Nirvana because my brother's always been a bit more hip than me. He's always
Mm.
been sort of even the one who chases the new things. And so he was listening to Nirvana. And I remember he'd written the lyrics out for, what's that? I'm so ugly, but today, what song is that?
I used to cover that in a band that I was in. What the hell is it called? It's not Polly. It's a one word title. Can't
It's
remember.
not, yeah, anyway, so that song, but he'd written all the
Lithium.
lyrics out.
Lithium.
Lithium, there you go.
Yep.
And so he's written these lyrics out, and I'm like, damn, have you written this? And he kidded me on for like a good 2 days. He's like, yeah, I'm thinking of, I don't have any music. I got to figure out, someone who can play. I'm like, says, yeah, you should definitely do something with this. And then 2, 3 days later, he's like, yeah, no, it's this new band I'm listening to. I'm like, oh, you son of a, like, very gullible. I've always been very gullible. I can't tell when people are tricking me. So,
Nice.
so
Yeah.
DJing, I didn't know you DJ'd. That was pretty cool. How did you get that gig? Just kind of wandered into it, or?
It was one of the first things in my life where I recognized, hey, if you want to do something, figure out a way to do it. And it wasn't that complicated, just like a lot of things. Once you kind of figure out how to get into it, suddenly you're showing up as 80% of success, or whatever the term
Mhm.
is. And yeah, so I had a friend that I was in the meteorology department there at Cornell, and he was a meteorology major, and Jim O'Sullivan, and he was like, yeah, come on down the station and try it out. And I ended up doing that for 2 years. As a matter of fact, I left and came back about 8 years later, and get into that part of the story. But came back, and even as a 25-year-old, just went back to the college radio station. I was like, hey, you still got a spot? Let me check this out. And so yeah, and I guess for one night too, I would consider myself a shock jock.
Okay.
I was working Christmas Eve 1992, and we kind of had a lot of latitude, even though it was a commercial station with marketing and advertising and stuff. They gave us a fair bit of latitude to play what we wanted, especially Christmas Eve. Who's listening? Who's listening to this stupid college radio station at
Yeah.
11:30 at night on Christmas Eve? So I was like, oh, I'll have a little fun, play Sympathy for the Devil. And I prefaced the song with, we've been hearing a lot about this Jesus character lately. How about a little sympathy for the devil? You're listening to 93.5 WVBR. And turns out people are listening to college radio at 11:30 on Christmas Eve because the boards lit up, and that was my one moment of infamy. But
Really? Oh man.
yeah, yeah.
People.
So
Oh
somebody
man.
called, and the first call that I answered, they were like, "Oh, that's disgusting. I am canceling my advertising." And I sort of turned kind of white and like,
Uh-oh.
what have I just done? There never ended up being any fallout from it, but it was a much more muted rest of the show. Let's put it that way.
That's so funny because it's funny that stuff, right? Because that's, obviously the last DJ gets into whether you can and can't do that, and that's why it all gets
Mhm.
sanitized and whatnot. But when you say something like that, it's clearly just a lead in. It's clearly supposed to be funny. It's not meant to be. You know what I mean? Like I
I
don't
wasn't I
understand how
wasn't I wasn't
people.
taking some stand
Yeah,
of
exactly.
organized religion or anything. It was just
Yeah.
like sometimes, and that I get myself in trouble all the time. My mouth speaks before my head has anything to say about it. And so, it just was kind of one of those like off the cuff, like, oh, wouldn't this be cute and cheeky or whatever? And I just said it and then realized the error of my ways.
Yeah. Did you enjoy it though? Was that something you really enjoyed doing, DJing?
Oh, it was awesome. It was so much
Yeah.
fun. It was hard. And but it helped, it's one of those things that it's one of those life affirming and kind of helps in your life affirming isn't the right term, but it kind of helps you get over these fears that you have. Just, everybody, I think most people anyway, aren't just naturally charismatic. They're not naturally like able to get out in front of people and do their thing. And it took a long time to kind of get enough confidence where you didn't feel nervous about every time that red light went on and suddenly the
Yeah.
microphone was open. And and here we are now. Like you're a podcaster, I'm a podcaster. I played music in front of people, and
Yeah.
I think it all sort of started. That was sort of the beginning of the progression to where it's like, okay, it's okay to put yourself out there and see what happens. So yeah, it was a great gig. I enjoyed it. I don't know that it helped my studies very much. The beginning, that when you first get the gig, you are working the 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift. And after
Mm.
several months, you graduate to 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. And it's not like, well, I've got class tomorrow. Like, no, that's your shift. You're you're playing. So didn't help my studies so much, but nothing was going to help my studies at that point anyway. So that's a different story
But
entirely.
but that's what college should. I mean, at least in part, it should be about is those experiences. Well, I mean, the education's get through it. I mean, I always tell my kids or people I've hired even when I'm hiring, I'm not. I mean, as long as you've passed all your courses and your classes, and as long as you're not like, I don't care about your transcript. I want to know if you're the right fit. I want to know if you can present yourself. I want to know all those
Yeah,
things.
yeah.
People get too hung up on that kind of stuff. Go and enjoy college. Go and enjoy school. Go and enjoy being a teenager or an early 20-year-old because it doesn't last that bloody long. We're a testament to that.
That's a hard thing, right? Though to give that kind of direction or advice to the kids. I have two daughters, both
Yeah.
both about to be teenagers now. One's 12, and it's that whole like, go out there and mess up, make
Yeah.
mistakes, and just don't make the mistakes that are so big that you can't come back from those mistakes. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, how do you know what those mistakes are? How do you know what that threshold looks like? And you only know after the fact,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like, well, I agree with you for sure. Like, live your life, do things, mess up,
Yeah.
experience all the things, because you only get one shot at it, et cetera, without getting too, too, preachy or whatever. But it's tough, man.
It is though. I mean, I think the longer you live and the more sort of, revolutions around the sun that you do, you realize that all that schmaltzy stuff that goes onto nice seafoam backgrounds on Facebook and Instagram and on little mugs and things, they are true. They're platitudes, but they're also true.
Yeah, it's very true, and it's hard to convince a 17-year-old of that sometimes, but we try.
So when did you start playing, quote unquote seriously then? What was the first band experience? When did you decide to take the leap from, being sort of
Mhm.
fairly faceless behind a microphone as a DJ to actually getting up on stage and presenting music to people?
Yeah, I would, other than some false starts and whatnot, we actually finally started getting gigs. A bunch of high school and college friends of mine put together something. We lived in a grungy house just off of campus that literally, if you went down to the basement, there was always 4 feet of standing water in the basement, so you would
Oh
never go
my
down to the
God.
basement. So it was one of these like, one of these classic college stories of, yeah, we paid $175 for the four of us total in rent, and the pipes were always backing up and whatever. But anyway, it was our band house, and that was our first gig was in the living room in that band house. That would have been, I don't know, I was 21 years old at that point. Just had a great time, and then from there went down to Tennessee, where I got an advanced degree down there in geology at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and that was where I found guys who had been in a band, and we sort of put some feelers out. We ended up playing in the Battle of the Bands at the university, and had a bunch of gigs and put together a demo tape that we'd hawking our wares to the various bars and places around there. And that was really where I started to learn a little bit more about actually songwriting, and the craft, and bringing people together in that way. So that was kind of a pretty big moment. And then back to New York for a couple of years, back to university again for a few years, to get another degree. I spent way too many years in college. I guess I liked higher learning, or just wasn't very good at it, and had to take a while to finally figured it out. One of the two. But yeah, played, just kind of continued to knock around, but then ended up in the real world in 2008. Finally, once 35 years later, finally was able to escape into the real world for good, and ended up in Houston, and played in a cover band called the Rock Doctors, which was fitting because it was for PhD trained geologists. So there was a little double entendre there with
Jeez.
the Rock Doctors. So that was cool, and that was where we really started to, there again play for some. I don't want to say big audiences. We actually just gigged with our friends, but
Right.
continued to learn, continued to grow as a musician. But then we went over. The family went over to Indonesia for 5 years,
Right.
and so with work, and so we ended up in a camp in Sumatra. And when I say camp, I sort of mean like, we were a company that had security because we were in a foreign country, and you just never quite know. I guess there was always slight security issues. Never really anything that we noticed for sure, but just to keep the people safe and whatnot. But there that was where I really, and here I was, at this point, 42 years old or something like that. That was where we finally had the resources, the time, and we were such a sort of a tight collective of expatriates over there, that I spent 3, 4, 5 years of playing a lot of music. And we had a captive audience because we were in a camp in a foreign country. And so that certainly helped bring about a renaissance of music. And so yeah, we had a set of we could probably pull out anything from 25, 30, 35 different songs. And so they were
Yeah.
all covers, but it was a blast. We had so much fun, and played for Indonesian national audiences as well as American, British, other expatriate audiences as well,
Right.
and played some Christmas music to a group of Muslims, which was kind of fun. Little Run Rudolph Run and Jingle Bell Rock to folks that maybe had different opinions and different viewpoints, but
Yeah.
it was pretty great. It was pretty great, and an incredible opportunity. Leaving the music stuff aside, just an incredible opportunity. Obviously, moving the family over there for 5 years and kind of jumping into the unknown, and then
Yeah.
after 5 years, not wanting to leave because it was so enriching culturally, travel wise. Just the friends that we made over there. It was a special time and a really lucky opportunity for us as a family to be over there. I don't know. Have you ever had a chance to travel in Asia or Australia or any parts over there?
Not Asia, no. Now, Australia, I have no intention of ever going anywhere near, Pete, because I am deathly afraid of spiders. I think if I know that they're not dangerous, but if I saw a huntsman spider, I just think I'd faint pure away. I think that would be at the end of me. Asia,
Yeah,
no, I've not been.
they got these birds called cassowaries over there too, which are like basically dinosaurs incarnate. And I know that birds are supposedly a part of the dinosaur family, but those things will kill you dead in a heartbeat.
Pretty much everything that has evolved in Australia wants to eat humans. I mean, that's just including
Yeah.
half the male population of Australia. That's, the human population. I just can't believe anyone wants to live there. It's insane to me that this massive. I was talking to my wife about this the other day that people don't realize how big Australia is because of, the Mercator projection on the map. And it
Sure.
looks very, very small because it's south of the equator, but it's almost as big as Canada. It's huge. And most of it is desert. And
Yeah.
most of that desert's inhabited by things with fangs and spikes and very long legs and bad attitudes. And, I'd just leave it to the Australians. I'm good. I'm good here. I like Canada, Pete. I like it. Come down to the US. I'll come visit there, and I'll go to Europe where I know it's safe. But no, I've not been over to Asia yet either. And there's potential to be able to head over to Thailand sometime because they're setting up a new. I don't know if this is going to make it in the pod, but they're setting up a new wildlife health center in Thailand, and that's kind of my work over here. So we might have a
Hmm.
chance to go out to Thailand. So we'll see.
Oh, yeah, man. It's a beautiful Thailand's a beautiful country. I was just amazed the whole Southeast Asia. We made it to Sri Lanka, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia. And
Wow.
you grow up as an American watching nothing but Vietnam movies like oh yeah, your mortal enemy, the
Yeah.
Vietnamese, and then you get there and you're like, how are you people so nice? Is it even possible to be this nice? And I think that there may be a little bit of knowing where the bread is buttered as well. Like they recognize American dollars and tourism is,
Yeah.
and it's just expatriate dollars and tourism is really really helping the economy. But you never got that feel. You always got that feel that it was just so warm and genuine, and just a real special place to spend some time. I hope you get a chance to go over there. You'll absolutely love it.
But I think it's I always no, not always tell people, but I tell people that if you ever get the opportunity to live in any other country than the one you were born in, especially if it is culturally different, you should take it with both hands because
Mm.
even the difference between Canada and UK is pretty huge. It's a pretty big difference culturally. And you see when you get arm's length from the culture you're brought up in, you really kind of see, oh, yeah, no, that's all wrong. All that stuff that we thought and all about the rest of the world, it's just all wrong. It was the same thing I had an experience when I went to Berlin. So I grew up, I was in the military, I grew up in England. The Germans are our sworn enemy. And, we
Yeah.
fought the war against everything else. So you sort of get indoctrinated and brainwashed a little bit into that culturally. Then when you
Hmm.
go to Berlin and you see all their war monuments to all their dead, and you see all the museums and things, oh yeah, they're exactly the same as us. I mean, the
Yeah.
generals and the politicians are the difference, but the people who were affected, they're no different from you and I, and they're no different they're just as scared, they were just as young, there was just as
Hmm.
much loss and devastation. So it really I think that unifies and sort of brings you into that, yeah, they're not really the enemy, and they're certainly not anymore. Now it's the
Well,
French.
now it's yeah, everybody hates the French. No, it's I mean, the classic story of World War One, 1914 Christmas, right?
Yeah.
Where they broke out in song and started playing football and across the trenches, and then midnight hit or whatever, and they stopped singing Christmas carols and went back to the machine guns and started beating the crap out of each other again for another 3 years. So
Yeah, it just breaks your heart, man.
yeah, yeah, all people. That's it.
Okay,
But
so let's bring the podcast back up because we're going to a bit of a macabre route here. Which song?
yeah. No, good. Yeah, good point. Good call. No, so 5 years there, and then ended up swinging back over here to now living in New Orleans area, actually, southern Louisiana, and been here for 5 years, and really in the last 5 years, I it's funny because I got to a point where I was like, man, I'm starting to figure out this guitar thing, and I was singing lead vocals, which is something I hadn't done up until that point a whole lot. So it was just this blossoming of what I think maybe was unlocked potential. It's like, okay, man, now I'm in my 40s. I got this figured out. I got something to do for the rest of my life. And I've probably played in the last 5 years. I've probably played a total of 5 hours worth of guitar in the last 5 years. So unfortunately, it's something that you just sort of have a certain amount of discretionary time,
Yeah,
and with family, with work, and other things going on. And instead of pouring my time into playing music, I've poured most of my time into listening to music
yeah,
and talking about music, as we're doing here, which is the reason why you and I are actually having this conversation, is because of the podcasting that we both have stumbled into. And I think, for me, for sure, it was the COVID experience of like, well, I'm stuck in a house. What can I do to sort of reach out and meet people and talk to people? And I had a buddy of mine that I went to school with, Brian Ruskin. He was also a geologist, trained at Cornell University, just like I was. And we would talk about music all the time back in 2005, 2006, 2007. And we continued to kind of bounce back and forth musical ideas. And we had a Google document that we would share, that we would say, okay, what's the song you want to talk about today? And I would throw a song out there, and a link to it. And we'd literally, just like this, almost this game of telephone or whatever, you just sort of play back and forth on this Google document. We weren't even talking to each other. We were just basically texting back and forth for like 2 years. And we sort of had the embryo of some kind of an idea of conversing about music and discussing music and dissecting it. And then COVID happened. We were like, hey, let's do something with this. So we turned it into our podcast that we've been doing now for about 3.5 years, I guess, at this point.
yeah, and that's the honest and unmerciful. I talk about this lots on the show, and people who listen to the podcast will know Pete's name because I always sort of shout him out when he comments on our posts. Great show, and it was. I remember that's how we connected because you'd commented. I'd posted something in the Tom Petty Nation, and you'd posted about because you'd basically just done, or maybe the couple of weeks before, had done your
Mm-hmm.
episode on wildflowers. And
Yeah.
so I listened to that, and that was my entry. So, of course, a really good entry point into the podcast. But again, I think that when you've got co-hosted podcasts, you come for the content, you come for whatever, whatever it is. If it's a Wildflowers or if it's, you did Cougar Mellencamp, you've done Pearl Jam, you've done a whole bunch of different
Mm-hmm.
artists, but you stay for the host, right? You stay for the badinage, you stay for that relationship between two people. And that relationship between you and Brian is so familiar and so easy to drop into. It's just like listening to, eavesdropping on two old friends in a pub talking about
Mm-hmm.
music, which is
Yeah.
perfect, right? For a listener, that's like, yeah, I'm totally on board with this. And I love listening to you guys when you're doing the pod because you like, man, you talk about insights, like you guys' insights, even on albums that I've known before. I'm like, I'd never picked up on that, or I hadn't heard, or I hadn't thought about this that way, or I hadn't. What's the one I was thinking about? So I was looking through this for the pod, and I'm trying to remember what bloody album it was. I think it was something off Soul. It was something that, and I think it was something that Brian said. I think what it is now. I have to find it, but I was like,
Mm-hmm.
that's just totally changed the way I think about this song. And I've
Yeah.
known that I've been listening to that album for, well, how old is that album? What was it, 80? Is that about
86,
80,
I think.
86? Yeah. So I've listened to that album for most of my adult life
Right.
and just hadn't picked up on, oh, this goes on, which is what I think we try to do on podcasts is about music, is we try and bring a bit of enrichment to people's listening. So tell
Yeah.
the listeners about, again, how that grew out and what you're doing now, what the sort of the format of the show is. And you got 40 episodes out. You just released one this past week, which I haven't listened to yet.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, thanks for all those kind words. I think that for whatever chemistry that we have, it's definitely hard earned. Definitely the first couple episodes we clunked around a little bit, just like everybody does, finding their format. But yeah, 40 episodes in at this point now, and we've really. I think maybe it was around the episode. It was around that Petty episode, actually. That was one that really, I think, sealed for me. Oh, okay, I think we're doing something right here,
Right.
perhaps. And yeah, so just quickly, that was that was definitely where you remember you reached out. We had conversations around how do I get music into this podcast, and
Yeah.
do I even put music into this podcast, and how does it work, and all this stuff. And I feel lucky somehow to be a part of your embryonic journey into what has become certainly the best Tom Petty podcast out there, and one of the best music podcasts that I listen to. And you're just so I think you do such a good job with being able to thread the needle between um, serious fandom and kind of geekiness in terms of like, let's talk about the equipment that he's playing here. Let's talk about this chord structure and whatnot. But you touch on that, but you do such a good job of adeptly balancing that with just how does it feel, and what does it make you feel like, and I think that we try to emulate that as well. I know a lot of times it's easy, right, when you're doing a podcast to just tell the listener how smart you are and how insightful you are, and be so proud of like all of these insightful observations that you make. And I don't think anybody wants to hear that. Like, oh, this
Yeah.
this is an A minor going into a G Lydian, and how that gets old real fast. And so we try to keep it conversational as much as we can. We're, like you said, 40 episodes in, and basically we kind of started off with this idea of well, the first episode that we did was Beck's Odelay. And I noticed when I was listening to Odelay that there's a lot of Van Morrison all over Odelay, and they must have gone, or the Dust Brothers, whoever produced it, must have gone into like a record store and found a copy of them from Van Morrison, and been like, we're just going to take this and basically lift everything off of here and turn it into this album. And so, I said, just kind of off the cuff, um, what do these two words, Van Morrison, have to do with today's episode? And that's sort of one of those hooks that I
Yeah.
think, you have your hooks too, right? You have your petty trivia, and you rate it at the end. You do a good job of keeping to the script. And I think people in podcasts sort of like to have that familiarity. And we try
Yeah.
to do that as well with the two words, and kind of introduce it in the same way to make it sort of familiar. So that's kind of where the two words came from. But
That's
yeah,
cool.
we have a good time. We have a good time with it, and I think we found a certain rhythm.
Definitely. And I mean, I always tell people, and I've shouted this out on a couple of my podcasts, definitely a couple of times, is that you have the best rating system of any podcast in the world. The
Yes.
warm and tasty burritos
The
scale is
warm.
that is the gold standard for all rating scales.
All podcasts should move to that international system of rating. Yeah, we yeah, the quick story behind that. We actually did a pilot episode where we were testing out Radiohead's OK Computer, and we wanted to see, if it sounded okay. And so we just basically just hit record and started talking, and sort of worked our way through it. And one of the things about Radiohead's OK Computer is that there are a lot of songs that are very lush and very full. And I made some comment to Brian about how I feel like I'm being wrapped in a warm burrito blanket for this particular song or whatever. And I think he took it, was like, hey, that's great. How many burritos would you rate this album, since we're already talking about burritos? And so
Yeah.
so yeah, Radiohead's OK Computer was the genesis of that. But yeah, we and then we of course fill our burritos with something that is emblematic of emblematic of whatever album we're reviewing that week. And so that's fun. And you came on, one of our best episodes, I think, was the David Bowie Hunky Dory episode, where you came on and added a very nice third counterpoint to what Brian and I were talking about. And speaking of spiders, I think that we filled it from with one of us filled our burrito with embryonic spiders from Mars, I believe, that
You
week.
did,
So
yeah. And I got the willies. It was
little
no,
little did I know that I was turning you inside out, making your skin crawl when I did that. So I apologize, but I just saw your skin crawl again as I said that word on the video here. So
yeah, no, I mean that was so much fun too. Like, and again, I mean, I've talked to lots of people about this. Like, anytime you get invited on someone else's podcast, it's like it really genuinely is an honor. You're just like, hey, thanks, man. The fact that you want me on your podcast is just super, super cool. And the fact also that your format, this is, I do this on the petty thing, but it's the interviews or the chats are their own thing. This isn't really within the format of the show. So to bring someone else into that format
Mm.
I was nervous. Like, I was like, I hope I don't ruin this because you guys have got a good thing going. You think I've just got to find out where I fit into that conversation and just Kev, don't say everything you want to say. Say about a third of what you want to say, and that'll probably give them enough time for the edit. So
Right. Yeah, it's tough. There again, you want to go on and just like, wax eloquently about all
yeah,
how amazing an observationalist you are and how much you know about music criticism and that gets I think you can see people can see through that. I've listened to some podcasts where you listen to a half an episode, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. We're geeking out on Iron Maiden. That's fine, but I've got something else I got to do. So
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So I'd kind of written you offline and sort of obviously I send the questions out to my guests and whatnot, but I did want to ask you about when you do these types of podcasts that we do, where we're sort of pulling apart, like you said, we're looking at structure, we're looking at arrangement, we're looking at
Hmm.
production, we're looking at lyrics and melody and all these types of different things. And I always call it active listening. So my process is I'll listen to the album and then I'll
Yeah.
listen to the song and I listen to it a few times, just, quote unquote, recreationally, just so I can think of, okay, well, how does everything flow together? What do I like the song? And then
Hmm.
I go back and when you start call active listening, that's when you start pulling apart. Oh, I'd never noticed there's like a tambo or something there, or there's this harmony part or whatever it is. And you end up just necessarily hearing more in music. So are you able to just completely switch that off when you listen to music now? Or has it sort of started to, has that
No,
changed the way that yeah, sort of for
it's
good or bad?
yeah, it's creeped in. It's creeped
Yeah.
in for sure, for good or bad. And I do a lot more active listening than I might otherwise. And I think it also drives my family a little batty. I think
Yeah.
as well. Like, oh, did you hear that? Did you hear that harmony there? That up high harmony? And there's obviously some processing going on with that vocals, and they're just like,
Yeah.
Dad, please.
We don't care.
I really just want to, like you say, just want to, the Owl City's on. Just let me listen to Owl City and stop talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I find that the active listening is really you can chime in as well because I'm sure you have definite thoughts about this as well. But it's really actually taught me a lot about what I personally love about music. The things that I really appreciate and enjoy, I kind of knew this already, but there's something about like for me, it's whenever there's interplay and interlocking rhythms, interlocking guitars. There's something structurally that is very satisfying to me when I listen to that. I've
Yeah.
always been a fan of like the Talking Heads, for example, and they do a lot of polyrhythmic stuff and interlocking guitar parts. And I think that maybe that's the drummer in me, maybe that's the rhythm guitar player in me. I'm not sure. Maybe it's all of those things, but I find that I really am keyed in on that stuff much more than I recognized as just a passive listener. And I don't know, are there certain elements that you have found that have become even more kind of obvious to you as to, oh, that's what it is about music that really draws me in?
But a really good question, and I don't know if I think what it for me, I think more than anything else, it's given me a better vocabulary, a better way of articulating what I think about music. I can do that
Yeah,
much more easily now, right? I can pick and I can
yeah.
probably the same where I can do the sort of the really quick pass analysis stuff pretty rapidly now. I know where the moments are, I know where the points are in a song.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of how I listen to music or my enjoyment of music, I think that here's one thing it's definitely done is it's made me a lot less dismissive of music that I maybe
Mm.
thought that I don't like.
Yeah.
I've come across that with the Ultimate Catalog Clash that I did with my friend Corey.
Mm.
I would have sworn to you 4 or 5 months ago that I hate Metallica. No use for them, no time for them. They're crap. It's just I don't like them at all. Being forced to sit down and apply this sort of whatever we're going to call it a skill to Metallica
Hmm.
is like actually, yeah. There's a reason why they're as big as they are. It's because James Hetfield's a very good songwriter. He is a good lyricist. He is a good vocalist. I just don't happen to like a lot of Lars Ulrich's drumming. But I can sort of put that to one side, but it still becomes that it's that stone in the shoe, right? When you do
Yeah.
sort of pick up on something and you can really hear it keenly, like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of getting in the way for me of this good song, you know?
You and Corey do a great job. I haven't listened to everything, but I got through a lot of the Genesis episodes that you did, and
Oh, thanks, man.
you guys have a really natural flow as well. Speaking of mutual admiration society here, but yeah, I love your flow, and you guys have a great back and forth, and you're very honest and unmerciful as well, which is something I like. And one thing that I find very hard to do is or let me go in a different direction. You mentioned that you listen to things and you didn't think you were going to like them, and then you recognize, oh, there's really some elements here that really do draw me in, and that actually are kind of cool and inspiring, and all this, that, and the other. I find that the more it almost works to the detriment of the podcast sometimes, because if you listen to something enough, if you listen to a song 10 times or 15 times, it's very rare that you come away from it 15 times later liking it less.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, okay, if I listen to it 10 times, I grab onto something, I get used to something that maybe I didn't like, but then it's like, oh yeah, I'm kind of waiting for that little quirky thing that used to bug me, but now it's like, oh, it's kind of comforting now that I'm listening to it for the 13th time. And so I almost wish that I could give the burrito scale after listen number two, and be very like, okay, this is my initial impression of it. 1.5 warm, tasty burritos out of 5, done with it, and then move on. But then you lose the ability to kind of dissect it. So your 1.5 burritos turns into 2.5 burritos pretty quick, and suddenly you're given I don't know, whatever album happens to be,
Yeah.
way more credit for than maybe you thought you were going to originally. So
Wouldn't that be an interesting exercise, eh? To do that, do exactly that. You know,
yeah.
one listen, rate it, and then go back in and do your sort of an analytical listen, and then just leave that to one side just to see what that difference is. Because I totally
Mm-hmm.
agree with you. And even doing a catalog that changes again because I'm way more acclimatized to again to throw back to Metallica now than I was when I started, and now I probably wouldn't be quite as harsh as I was in
Mm-hmm.
those first couple of episodes, right? Because I know what they are now, where I really didn't going in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it is a good thing though because again, I like music. And
Right.
it's kind of fun to be polarizing sometimes and say, oh, well, that kind of sucks. I don't really like that. But
Mm-hmm.
underneath it, like, again, these bands that are at this level, they, they're just not, it's like, it's, oh, that hockey player is terrible. Well, no, he's still probably in the top, 0.02% of all hockey players in the world. He just screwed up on
Very,
that
yeah.
one game that you didn't like. I mean, it's the same thing with these artists, or no, they're Taylor Swift or even Bieber, man. I mean, you look at these artists. There's something there. There's a reason. It's not just money making. There's a reason
Mm-hmm.
why people listen. It's because they're writing songs that are catchy and people like. So,
Yep. 100%. Absolutely. Absolutely.
well, speaking of people who write music that's catchy and that people like, what was your entry point into Petty?
Oh,
Like, was it?
are we just now getting there an hour in?
Oh, hey,
Um,
we go all over the place with this. You've heard it before.
yeah. No, beautiful. Absolutely. I mean, I sort of hit on it earlier where the music videos and MTV were definitely my entry point. I think again that Woman in Love video for some reason has always just stood out for me. Stop Dragging My Heart Around, Refugee, all of those videos. The Waiting were just ubiquitous in the early days of MTV. And I think, if you had a video in MTV, not every song had a video at that point. So even Refugee, I think that video was probably made, when Damn the Torpedoes came out in '79, there was no MTV. And so when MTV showed up, they were like, okay, we just got to gather together any video that exists from
Yeah.
anybody over the last 5 years. And Petty was already there with some of his stuff. So right away he was just front and center. And obviously, everybody talks about the "Don't Come Around Here No More" video, and that certainly kind of gave you a different side of Petty
Yeah.
than you had before. It kind of humanized him in a way, and sort of started that for me has always been the turn I wouldn't call that phase two of his career. I know you had a conversation with John Paulson about that
Yeah.
recently of where the phases of Petty start and stop. But that for me is kind of the beginning of this transformation of him from just a snotty, snarling punk to somebody that's got a sense of humor and it's goofy. He's wearing this big funny hat, and
Yeah.
who's wearing a top hat in 1986 in a music video? That's just ridiculous. But it just so happens it's funny, right? Because it was just part of the concept of the Mad Hatter and Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
But somehow that became iconic to Tom Petty's look, even though I'm sure he didn't intend that to be the case. It just happened sort of by happenstance, which I think is always kind of really interesting. But you sort of go through that period, and then that coincided and dovetailed perfectly with George Harrison's rebirth with the
Yeah.
Cloud9 album. And then you get into all of these 40 somethings, and Petty wasn't quite 40 at that point, but he was about to be, or maybe he had just become 40. I don't know. I think he was born in 1960, 1950. 1950. So he was, on the cusp, but of these sort of middle-aged rockers with Jeff Lynne producing George Harrison, and then the Wilburys, and then Full Moon Fever. And so, as a 16-year-old kid in 1989, just like thirsty for music and already just absolutely devouring the Beatles and learning how to play guitar based on, whatever was on the White Album. That was just this perfect opportunity to be like, oh, Tom Petty, I like his stuff. George Harrison, he's a Beatle. It's happening now.
Right.
Therefore, I am both somehow vintage and current in the zeitgeist of the time. And it was just a really special kind of moment to bring all that stuff together. And so that's, for me, that's where it all kind of started. Just other memories of just going back into his catalog. Damn the Torpedoes was a big one for friends of mine and I in college, just going down the highway. There was something too about the quirkiness of Petty, which he also was leaning into at that point with his drawl.
Yeah.
Kind of starting maybe with Spike off of Southern accents, but definitely doing a lot. Well, no, I shouldn't even say that. I guess the whole point of this is the some of the stuff even off of Damn the Torpedoes. Here Comes My Girl was one that we used to just sing at the top of our lungs in the car, just having fun, kind of contorting the already contorted accent and lyrics, the way he would snarl and drawl some of those things.
Yeah.
And yeah, so yeah, I was a Neil Young fan too at that time for the same reason. Neil Young also had that same affectation with his voice, where kind of the Dylan-esque Neil Young, Bob Dylan, Tom Petty kind of thing, all kind of coming together. But and then I will say too, one of the things that really kind of cemented it, we talk about what our favorite albums are by various artists, and we all have reasons for those being our favorite albums. And I've always been very partial to Let Me Up, I've Had Enough, not as his best, but as one that has meant a lot to me. And
Okay.
when I was getting my PhD in geology, I actually spent a few years in the Atacama Desert in northern Chile, in South America. And there I would be alone with a field assistant. The two of us would be 10 miles from the closest town, probably 10 miles from the closest person, because if you were out in the middle of the desert at night, you were not, you might not make it to morning, you were exposed and all that stuff. So it was very isolated out there. And I had a few cassette tapes, and one was double-sided Bryan Adams, Cut Like a Knife, and Reckless was a little Canadian love from my friends up north. Blues compilation, Little Walter, best greatest hits. He was Muddy Waters' harmonica player, and just some incredible stuff on that. So I listened to that over and over again. Some Beatles tapes. I think I had the Stones' Beggar's Banquet and Let It Bleed, A side, B side on a cassette tape. And then I had Southern Accents and Let Me Up, I've Had Enough. And so while those two albums are not necessarily considered in the upper echelon of the Petty catalog, and everybody, of course, has their own opinions on all this stuff, those two for me have always held a really special place in my heart, because I just remember watching the sun go down, or seeing the Southern Cross up in the sky, knowing that it was just me and a buddy and 10 miles to the next town, and just listening to those on the long car rides back to base camp or wherever it happened to be we happened to be going. And so yeah, Petty's just been all over his fingerprints have been all over my DNA ever since MTV. And he continues to do it, and I appreciate your tireless work in the
Yeah.
in that regard as well, because it gives me a third, fourth, fifth, sixth chance to kind of revisit some of this stuff that maybe I'd forgotten about. And just as you were saying about or whatever album we happen to be reviewing, there's songs that I listened to that I hadn't heard in the same, that I'm now hearing in a completely different way, even though I felt like I already knew them inside and out. So it's just yeah, appreciate that.
It's great, and that outside look though, it's something that you know. I mean, it's the same with Queen, like doing the Queen podcast with Randy. Like a lot of those songs he's never heard before. So I take for granted,
Right.
well, of course, everyone loves this song, and then you find out that oh no, not everyone loves this song. That's just me. You know what I mean? So to getting that sort of not reality check or affirmation, either one way or the other, is it's always interesting. But that I mean, being out in the like you said, being out in the desert and when you're isolated, because I've got sort of a similar thing when I was in the army. There's a
Right. Right.
similar experience with certain types of music or certain
Yeah.
albums. It does change the way that it changes your relationship to it, right? It
Hmm.
just changes because it's so locked in to that kind of experience, that personal experience, that you're never going to be able to fully detach that. So you don't you are biased, and that's not a
Hmm.
bad thing. That's not a bad thing either, right? And Let Me Up, I mean, I think I said it on most of the episodes too. It's not like those songs. It's not a weak set of songs. It's what Tom needed to do at that point, and he got it out. And there's some really good stuff on there, like Runaway
Hmm.
Trains. I think is I'd kind of dismissed that song until I dove back into it for the episode. I was like, man, this is a good song. This is a
Hmm.
really, really strong song. Do I love the production on it? No. Would
Right.
I change it? Yeah, maybe. But it's of that time, and they did it quite quickly.
Hmm.
So it's just what it is. So I think that the whole thing about it's not a good album or it's not this whatever. It's Southern accents is just this mishmash. But
Yeah.
it's part of that evolution of an artist, and I always prefer when an artist has a bit of a blip here and there, or a change, because it means they're trying to grow.
Yeah.
And it's like you said. I mean, you're a Radiohead fan, and I'm not really that much of a Radiohead fan, but it's the same
Hmm.
thing because they're just constantly looking for something to challenge themselves and to something that interests them and keeps them interested in making music. And whether if it's a dud, okay, well they just did a dud, and maybe the next album will be good. So I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah, those transitions, I totally agree. I feel like "Let Me Up," I've had enough is a great transitional album, because it really was the bridge where he started, getting that Dylan influence. Given the what was it, the longest tour? What was the name of the tour the band played as his backing band there in '87, I guess. And so
Yeah,
getting a different perspective, having a different perspective on songwriting, and maybe he didn't stick the landing in the same way as he might have, but he certainly pointed him in a different direction that he needed to go. Otherwise, these artists, you just become an oldies act and get stale and just turn into Chuck Berry and play the same songs you wrote the first 5 years of your career until you die. But if you're somebody that really wants to grow, you're going to have a blip here and there. And like you say, regardless of whether or not it's a blip or not, everybody has their own impression on particular albums. But it
yeah.
certainly was a turning point in his career. So I will say too, we're talking about Petty and things that kind of affected me about him as I was kind of getting more into music. And I definitely don't want to talk about him without mentioning the third concert I ever saw in my life. The first one was Metallica. Interestingly enough, you
Nice.
bring up Metallica. That was my first show, Metallica and Queensryche back in '89. And then my second was Paul McCartney, which wasn't a bad number two, in
Wow.
Philadelphia in 1990. And then my third would have been, I believe, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers in Binghamton, New York, in the Broome County Veterans Memorial Arena. And so that was actually on October 11th. I looked it up because we can do that now with this interwebs thing. And it was the day before he actually performed on Saturday Night Live for the Into the Great Wide Open, where he did, I think, what did he do on there? I can't remember the two songs he played now. I guess Into the Great Wide Open and maybe King's Highway.
I think it was
But
King's Highway. Yeah.
yeah. So and now that I go back, I remember, oh yeah, I did get to see him play the songs the next day on national television, which is really kind of a treat. Like he was just 50 feet away from me yesterday, and now he's on, now there's 18 million people watching him on Saturday Night Live or whatever.
Yeah.
So that was a pretty cool experience. But I remember him opening the show. There's a couple of vivid memories I have from the show. The first was he opened the show, and I've never actually seen the whole Take the Highway Live video. I've seen clips of it, but the opening of the show is actually everything was dark. You couldn't see the set, you couldn't see anything, and he gets in front of the microphone and has the guitar, and he just starts playing just chaos on the guitar, just all sorts of noise, like you're
Okay.
listening to Metal Machine music by Lou Reed or something, and and then before the lights go up, he stops and there's no sound, and you just hear him go, "Oh baby." And then the lights come up, and it's like, what a cool ass way to open a show, because it's Tom Petty, it's that Southern drawl,
Yeah.
it's that everything. And then and then the lights come on, and everybody, it's sort of a famous tour where the set is just decked out with the big tree and all
Yeah.
the chandeliers hanging down and everything, and so you're sort of greeted with that, and that was amazing. And then of course there's I will never forget the "Don't Come Around Here No More" sequence. And again, I think a lot of people, having maybe seen Take the Highway Live, but probably a lot of people haven't. I remember just very vividly, and Mike Campbell comes out. He has a guitar, and
Yeah.
you probably know this already, so you know where this is going. He's got a guitar, and he starts playing some licks, and it's all very full of reverb and kind of drenched in reverb, and he has a loop pedal. I'm not sure what the technical term is, but I think a loop pedal. Hits the loop pedal, and it repeats the 2 seconds of whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Puts it down. Rhodey comes out, gives him another guitar, starts playing another lick, and then that starts looping. And he's got, in my mind, it's 4 or 5 guitars. I watched the video yesterday. I'm not going to tell you what the real answer is, but it's, in my mind, is 4 or 5 guitars that are playing at the same time. And then Stan comes out, or he's maybe sitting there, whatever, and he's got timpani mallets. He doesn't have drumsticks. He's got timpani mallets, and you know what "Don't Come Around Here No More" sounds like, right?
Yeah.
It's this huge drum noise. And so he comes out with timpani mallets, and I just remember him banging away on the drums with the timpani mallets, and just this, in the swell from the crowd, and the swell from the fullness of the music that's happening in front of you. And then Tom comes out, he leans on the chest, he pulls out the hat from the
Yeah.
video, and then the whole thing just goes haywire from there, right? The ending is the president's masks, where he's being chased by Nixon and Reagan and Bush, and then he takes the big symbol and shoves it in their faces, and they run away, and it's this crazy. It's almost like a Genesis concert or something from 1974. There's like theatrical elements to this Tom Petty concert. It's
Yeah.
just unbelievable experience, that show, and I just feel so lucky to have seen it. Just an amazing concert experience.
It's one of those two that when you watch that video, and I've watched that video a million times, like you said, I mean, Mike's intro in that, it's just, it's,
Oh,
if anyone was ever in any doubt that Mike Campbell's a virtuoso guitar player and a performer, again, gets lost to you. Mike Campbell's a brilliant performer. Just watch
mm-hmm.
that alone cements his legacy, right? But
Yeah.
usually when you watch videos, one of the problems with watch even video, like when you go to a show and then there's video online from the show, it never quite captures the feel of being there. That one, when I watched that one, I can feel what it must have been like in the crowd, like really in
Mm-hmm.
the crowd, really there, because there's just something about that video, and Take the Highway generally, but that one performance,
Mm.
if you connect to that really easily, or I do at least. And it's like, Freddie at Wembley, Freddie Mercury at Wembley. There's a few that do capture that, the real feeling and the emotion of being there. And that's always been one for me. And that
Can
version of
you?
it is just, oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you imagine being at Live Aid and watching that
Oh,
Freddie Mercury experience? Holy cow.
just incredible. I mean, and again, though, that's where Petty wasn't that usually, right? Not with the theatrics and everything. So it was interesting
Right.
that they did that for that tour. And I also
Mm-hmm.
think that it's cool that they did it for that tour and brought in the horns, and they brought in the backing singers, and they did all the, all the stuff with the southern accents as well. But they bring
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff in, but they only do it once. You know, so
Yeah.
it's so you're lucky, and especially if you get this one time. And of course, Petty
Hmm.
always put on a great show, but that one's just different. It's just a wee bit special because of that, I think.
Yeah, you don't know until hindsight that you're there for something so amazing. That was the only time I ever saw him. And I guess any show that I would have seen, I probably would have said I was lucky to have seen that show, and he was
Yeah.
amazing, and what have you, because he's not the kind of guy that has these off nights. He gave everything 100% every time he put that guitar over his neck. And but that
Yeah.
one in particular, that show, and at the end, they came out and they did their encore, and the lights came up, the house lights came up, people started streaming for the exits, and I actually wrote this on Tom Petty Nation, the Facebook group, just to make sure that just to see if anyone else had ever had this experience. And I again, I'm at least 20% sure that this actually happened. He Tom Petty came back out. The show was over. Like, people were leaving. The crew was tearing down the set. Petty comes out. He grabs the guitar and starts singing. I don't know what. Starts singing into the microphone. His guitar is no longer plugged in. He's strumming a chord like it's an acoustic guitar, but it's an electric, and nothing's happening. And suddenly the crew is like running around like, what the what's going on? And so they scramble like cockroaches, getting back up there on the stage and start plugging stuff in. And at this point, I got up. It was general admission. I was probably 40, 50 yards back or something, but everybody was leaving, and I took the opportunity to, because I'm a curious kid, and I'm like, I want to get up to the stage and see what this rock and roll thing's all about. So I got up. I was literally at the front row, and this is all happening in front of my eyes. And I look
Wow.
back, and I could see behind the stage. I see Benmont and Stan just toweling off,
Yeah.
and Petty's up there, and now he's starting to sing some Stones cover or something, whatever it is. And I look back, and they're looking around like, what's
What's he
going on?
doing?
What is happening right now? And one of them, I don't remember which one it was and whatever, but they just sort of shrugged their shoulders, and they turned around and came back out. They played like 5 or 6 more songs. They played like Stones covers. They were doing, Stan was
Yeah.
singing songs. I mean, I know he already had a song, Psychotic Reaction, that they always sang, but he sang 1 or 2 songs, and they just gave the fans like an extra 30 minutes
Yeah.
of pure joy. And, probably a third of the concert goers missed it because they were in the parking lot on their way home, catching taxis. And here I am in the front row of a Tom Petty concert, seeing something that's never, maybe never happened before.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, I put it on Tom Petty Nation, and it was interesting to see that everybody was like, man, you saw something, because that's I've never seen that. How I've seen 20 shows, and I've never seen him do that before.
Yeah.
So it was a really special night. So whatever was in the water that day, I was happy to be there.
Well, that's what I've talked to lots of people about. That's why you want to go and see a real band, like a proper rock and roll. If you like rock and roll, then it's not a formulaic set thing, and quite often it is, where they're just getting through, the hits and whatever it is. But now and again at a show, something will happen.
Yeah.
So I was talking to John was talking about it, right? Where Mike Campbell forgot the words to
Oh yeah,
whichever song it
at
was
the Dirty Knob show. Yeah,
at the
that's
Dirty
right.
Knob show, or when I went to see Foo Fighters in Edmonton, and they bring the guy up on stage to sing Tom Sawyer, and the guy absolutely nails it, and
Mm,
the roof came off, right? So, but those little things that happen at shows that make them unique and individual to you, that's why we go and see live music. That's what it's
yeah.
about to me. I don't want to see a band run through their songs and play them exactly the same way as they're on the CD, because then I'll just save my money and my hassle. I'll just listen to the CD. I want to
Hmm.
see something that's different. And Petty and the Heartbreakers, as well as just being one of the tightest bands you're ever going to see,
Hmm.
also had that capacity to just change things up, move things around, do extra stuff. I mean, can you imagine that last Fillmore date? Was it 3.5 hours they played? Something stupid, like
Right.
41 songs I think they played, or something insane.
Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah, and it really is, everybody gets that personal connection. And because every show is different and everybody intakes it in a different way as well, there's that feeling, even though there's 40,000 people in the stadium or whatever it is. And, that show that I went to probably had, maybe there was 10,000 people in Broome County there, but whatever the number was, it feels like, it's kind of cliche, but it feels like he's playing for you,
Yeah.
and you have those experiences, and you internalize those experiences the way you internalize them, and he's playing it the way he's playing it, and it feels like this this connection with something bigger than just, like you say, than just listening to the music. There's something special. There's a real thrill there. And I wish I'd had a chance to see him again, but I'm certainly glad that I had the chance to see him even just that one time, because it's always gone down for me as my favorite concert. And
Yeah.
I'll go to my grave probably saying that's the best show I ever saw.
So was that at what point then did you become like, what we call ourselves petty heads? At what point was Petty now you guys? So was it like you said that was sort of into the Great Wood Open, into that era, or the Wilburys and that kind of stuff? So once that gets locked in, do you remember sort of Wildflowers coming out and really looking forward to it, and Echo and Last DJ and all these albums? Was that something where that he was your guy and every album is just like a new Petty album, this is going to be awesome?
I think that he had been around so long for me that I think I probably took him for granted a little more than I
Yeah.
should, and just kind of expected it to happen over and over and over and over again. I think about, like, I remember having conversations with people in grad school of, what are your five favorite bands or five favorite artists or whatever, and I wouldn't ever put Petty in that list of five favorite artists, which is criminal, because I had, 8 of his albums, and I went to the best concert I ever saw was him. And yeah, when the greatest hits came out, I bought that thing and listened to it upside down and backwards a million times. And then
Yeah.
Wildflowers just blew me away. Right. And then, Echo, and even She's the One, Wall Circus, being played on MTV. And I kind of lost touch with him a little bit, I guess, after the Last DJ, because he just became a little bit less prolific when it came to music, and I was
Yeah.
moving on into different stages in my life. And I'm really excited about your podcast, because it's going to give me an opportunity to miss all the things that, for whatever reason, I kind of have glossed over or not given enough time to. But I would say definitely, in that time period, it was also a tough time period too, because grunge was becoming a thing, where it's like, it's sort of a split, the road splits a little bit there, right? Because what
Yeah.
I was really excited about in music was the next Pearl Jam album or the next Nirvana album, and the Smashing Pumpkins albums. That's what I was really gravitating towards. But yet again, there was this old reliable, the uncle I could always see at Christmas time, who was constantly coming out with this stuff that connected immediately.
Yeah.
And man, the greatest hits followed by with Mary Jane's Last Dance, followed by Wildflowers, certainly, was that was it for me, as far as like cementing his place as not
Yeah.
just somebody that's going to kind of casually entertain me on the side, but realize that this guy, is a special human being.
He says it's ended up on the same shelf now for me as the Beatles
Mm-hmm.
and as the Kinks and those bands who are just like, when everyone says who are your favorite bands, I don't usually say the Beatles. I don't usually tell people, unless it's a muso, then I'll say the Kinks and the Beatles, but because you just sort of assume those to a certain degree. Well, of course, the Beatles and the Kinks and Queen I love and all this. So I'll say, oh, I'm really into Greenlung at the moment, or I'm really into this and I'm really into that. I've found John Prine and I've Jim Croce and some of those types. There's all those types of things, but Petty's in that bracket now where, through doing this podcast and learning about his catalog and learning about the man as well, he's just at a different level to almost anyone else. So it's not really fair to compare anyone else to him. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, and he very rarely makes top lists of songwriters or artists or whatever, and it does kind of, I don't know if it's, yeah, I'm sure you're not a baseball fan like I am. I grew up watching the New York Yankees. There's the catcher that played for the New York Yankees, Yogi Berra. I just watched this sounds like it's way off topic, but it's actually, I promise I'm making a point here that is reference to Tom Petty. But Yogi Berra was always known as this guy that had Yogi Berraisms. He would say
Yeah.
goofy stuff like "It ain't over till it's over," and I don't go to that restaurant. That restaurant's too crowded. Nobody goes there anymore. Stuff like that. And he became known as the guy that would just say goofy stuff. And it turns out he was one of the greatest baseball players in the history of the major leagues, but nobody really thinks about him in that upper echelon, because he was just, oh, Yogi Berra, what a funny guy he was.
Yeah.
And I kind of almost feel like Tom Petty falls into that category a little bit, where he's just so reliable and he's so personable, and kind of, had that kind of that thing in the late 80s, early 90s, where it is Tom Petty and people made fun of his voice on Saturday Night Live, and
Yeah.
and but behind this personality that could come across as being cartoonish at times is this incredibly vital musician that had so many important things to say, and has this catalog of music that is just stupidly good
Yeah.
for a stupid amount of time. Who's 45 years old and selling 6 million albums? It's just unheard of, right? To come out with Wildflowers, even after the whole Wilburys thing has kind of crashed and burned,
It's
and
insane.
everybody's sort of moved on, and then that's his biggest album. What are you
Yeah.
talking about? It doesn't
And
make any sense.
and the thing that amazes me about that too is when, and again, I was talking to John Paulson about this. I think we'd even chatted a bit offline about this, maybe that once you get past Let Me Up, it's basically just clean sailing for the rest of the catalog because there's
Yeah.
no fat anywhere. It's going to get difficult to separate
Mm,
the eights from the sevens from the nine. Like it's so consistent from that point on
right.
that it's not really very many artists do that. And I don't think I'll get in trouble with my friend Bob Reedy over this. I don't think Springsteen did. I don't think he managed that same level of consistency late career. I don't think Dylan
Hmm.
did. I think Dylan's had a few high spots in his late career, but none of them have managed it. Where Petty, it just
Hmm.
never let up. It just never seemed to, the well never seemed to run dry. He always seemed to find something else to say. Like,
Hmm.
Fault Lines off Hypnotic Eye. I always bring it up on the podcast, but
Yeah.
for good reason, because that's a song that you write when you're in your absolute mid-30s prime as a songwriter, not when you're on your last album. It's bananas that he wrote that when at that stage of his career to me.
Yeah. Yeah. That whole album, and it's such a shame. I don't want to get maudlin here or whatever, but it really is true. You hear people talk about this all the time, like, oh, what would John Lennon have done if he had continued? And I'm the biggest Beatles fan in the world, but the stuff that he was writing at 40 sounded like somebody, in my opinion, that was a 40-year-old rock star that didn't quite have the same vitality or the same amount of things to say. Like,
Yeah.
Double Fantasy has some nice songs on it, and Milk and Honey has some nice songs on it, but it's just kind of like, well, sort of a continuation of his mid 70s kind of stuff, and it just isn't as immediate, it just isn't as present in my mind as the Beatles stuff. But Petty, I feel like the next thing that he released would have been, again, another just absolute stone cold killer, like
Yeah.
everything else he ever did. And you're absolutely right. I agree with that 100%.
Because he never won. I mean, apart from, again, well, even then I wouldn't say chasing trends, but he never did that. And it's where,
Mm,
one of my other loves, Queen, gets to the 80s when they started chasing trends instead of setting them.
mhm,
That starts to get dated then, where Petty never did that. And especially, like I said, with Wildflowers,
mm,
there really is a turning point there. It's like, I'm not really gonna worry about whether this is going to sell 6 million records or whether, I get any awards for this. All I'm going to focus on is writing the best music I can with my band. And if I do that, I trust my own ability, I trust the editor, I trust Ben Mont and Mike to tell me when things are off that I know will be okay. And I think that there's an authenticity to that. We use that word lots with Tom, right? Authenticity. But I think
mhm.
that's for me is where that switch happens. And like, I was talking with John Paulson about the Integrate Wide Open being there. I'm going to expand on that at some point. I might write a thesis on this. But there's a seriousness about, it was always serious about the work, but there's a seriousness about that side of it, about really it only being about the music and not worrying about any of the other nonsense, the marketing, the branding.
Yeah.
That's all someone else's job. I'm going to focus on making this next song be the best song I ever wrote. That's going to be my
Mhm.
approach every single time, right?
Yeah. And you brought it up, this idea that his songwriting, his lyrics really went to the next level on that album. And I think, there's that hobnobbing with somebody like Bob Dylan will do that to you.
Yeah.
And I'm not the world's biggest Dylan fan. I don't have very much Dylan, and I just don't have a whole lot of time for him personally. I just have a hard time, it just for obvious reasons, right? Either you're all in on Dylan, or you would rather read his poetry.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but there's definitely something about having those people in your life, and in your sphere of influence, and you can definitely feel the turn. And I made a mention of this earlier, this idea of him going from the snarly kid that's just looking to kind of stir things up and be a chaos agent to a certain degree, to kind
Yeah.
of growing into this period in his life where he's become more introspective. And obviously, with the things that were going on in his personal life, and in the late 80s, with his house being burned down, and then the marriage breaking down with
Yeah.
Jane, and everything that was going on there, it's there's obviously something, whether or not it's the production that happened with Jeff Lynne, turning that into the second phase of his career, whether or not it's the seriousness with which he really took his craft to the next level, at whether it be Full Moon Fever or Into the Great Wide Open. There definitely is something that lit another spark and turned him into something. He went from great to just deity level type
Yeah.
stuff at that point.
Yeah. And that sort of, I think it's at that stage too now, for me at least, where that'll never diminish now. I don't think there's anything, I don't think I could learn, well, personally, like, I don't think there's anything music that I could learn, especially not on the albums I'm going to end up covering, where I think, well, maybe he's not quite as good as I thought he was. I don't think that's only ever going to increase. My love
Yeah.
of his craft is only going to increase because his love of
Mm-hmm.
doing it and his love of learning and challenging himself. Like I said, but he wasn't chasing trends, but like, who goes and does Mojo? Who goes and reforms Mudcrutch? Who goes and takes a chance with this garage band aesthetic on Hypnotic Eye? It's just,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, man. Like I said, I'll put his late career up against most artists' heyday, and I think it
Mm-hmm.
probably stacks up. You know what I mean? Pound for pound.
Sure. Yeah, and like I say, I'm really, really jazzed about this because he kind of fell off my radar a little bit as I went back to just different phase in my life after Last DJ. So I don't know Mojo, and
Right.
I know you love Mojo, and I don't know Mudcrutch, and I know Mudcrutch is such an important part of his legacy. And I know there's a couple of songs that I've heard that I'm like, oh man, this is fantastic. I wish I knew more, but I just haven't had
Yeah.
the time or made the time to delve deep. And so I'm looking forward to seasons 17, 18, and 19 or whatever numbers you're going to be at that point. So
Okay. Well, we've done a couple of hours. I think that's probably, we could, and I know that definitely me and you could go for at least another two without repeating ourselves. But we should wrap it up here for now. And this is obviously, again, folks, I'll be splitting this into my chat with Pete, and then 10 questions will be a separate episode. Any final thoughts on Tom Petty or anything you want to talk about? And then just do let people know again about the podcast, where they can find you, where they can listen, and anything else you got going on.
well, I just would say again, the service that you're doing is it's real yeoman's work. It's impressive that you're able to take this idea and turn it into just this loose concept of going through song by song and making it so special and allowing us to kind of connect in a way that we hadn't before. And and again, I don't want to blow too much smoke, but it's not. It's real, and I think it's really something that I've appreciated. And you're the podcast. His music brings joy to the world, right? It brings joy to people, and just
Yeah.
the way you approach it, and just the positive energy that you bring to it has been great. And I feel really lucky and privileged to be a part of this and to be able to talk to you about this stuff and Tom's music that means so much to so many people and certainly to myself. And yeah, so thanks, Kev. Really. I guess I'll also sort of end it with a little bit of the plug of what I'm doing and where you can catch us. Myself and Brian Ruskin have that little podcast called Honest and Unmerciful, a record review podcast. Just rolls right off the tongue, doesn't it? But thank you also for helping get the word out too. I definitely feel like there's been some crossover listeners. I try to send people your way, and I know that I appreciate you helping us out. And we are currently on Spotify. We've got 40 episodes. We do episodes anywhere from you mentioned Pearl Jam. I think the Wildflowers episode was one of the first episodes where I really felt like we were hitting our stride. We do the Who, we do
Yeah.
I don't know, Smashing Pumpkins, Hall and Oates, My Bloody Valentine, Echo and the Bunnymen. Some of the most recent ones. The U2 episode was really a lot of fun, and one of the ones that I thought was particularly special in our canon, the David Bowie episode as well. So we kind of go all the way through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and into the 2000s with Death Cab for Cutie and Black Keys. So try to take it into slightly more current music. But man, it's a lot of fun. It's really helped get me back and inspired and thinking about music again. So yeah, if you're interested, check it out on Spotify. Currently, Spotify is about to change their their concept. They're sort of rebranding their podcasts. And so
Yeah.
the reason we went with Spotify was that we were able to play the whole song track in the episode. They're doing away with that as of maybe May or June of this year.
Oh, good grief.
So, I mean, it kind of leaves a lot of podcasters sort of out in the cold. No Tom Petty connection intended, but it might help us to sort of reimagine our format a little bit too, which I think also could maybe use a little bit of shake up. So maybe we're moving on to Dave Stewart production or or Jeff Flynn production. I don't know, but we'll see what happens. I think that we're sort of currently thinking about what it means, but it does mean that we're going to start getting out into different platforms because there's no reason to be hidebound by Spotify anymore if Spotify isn't going to do the thing that we went to them because
Yep.
they did that thing. so we'll see what happens. But anyway, honest and unmerciful record review podcast on Spotify currently, but likely by the time some of you listeners are getting around to this episode, out there in other formats as well. We got a Facebook page. I'm no longer on X because I just didn't want to deal with the drama anymore, but I'm over on Blue Sky. So yeah, look me up and do some interaction over there.
Yeah, and folks, I guess really all the guests I have on, I'm always genuine when I say that you should go and listen because Honest and Merciful is one of only, I would say, 4 music podcasts that I've listened to every episode, and I've enjoyed every episode regardless of whether I like the band or not. Which is that's the trick, right? If you can do that well, then you know you're on something. Because I mean, and you introduced me to XTC.
Yeah,
That Black Sea album now that's on fairly regular rotation on my turntable. Love that
that's
record.
very cool.
They're again Radiohead. I still don't love Radiohead, but I love listening to you guys talk about why you do. So, there you go. So folks, go check out Honest and Merciful. Go check out Pete on Blue Sky. I'll post some links in the episode notes as I always do. Pete, thanks so much, man. This has been an absolute slice, and I knew it would be.
This I had high expectations, and this has met and exceeded them, Kevin. This has been a lot of fun. I mean, I guess people just like talking about themselves partly, but being interviewed by you and talking to you, you're such a natural at it, and it's been enjoyable. And I hope I gave as much as I hope I gave as much as I got. And I believe that yeah.
And then some.
And then some. There we go. That was going to be me sticking the landing, and instead I tumbled headfirst into the seats.
All you got to remember is it's like the Olympic the vaulters, right? All you got to do is make sure you just do that at the end. As long as you
That's
do that
right.
at the end, everything else is good.
Yep. Big smile on my face. Nothing to see here. Everything's perfect. Awesome, Kev. Thanks so much, man.